Hello and welcome to YHTV's Trinity of Life. This is episode 45. I'm Christina Suzuma, your host for this program. Thank you so much for joining me again as I continue to explore the wonderful world of healing arts, meditation, therapies, and the many modalities to help us find balance in our individual journeys. We're excited to meet those of you who are on the leading edge of creating change on this planet. At any time during this live presentation, you can feel free to ask a question or make a comment by scrolling down on your screen and typing it into the comment box. Make sure to click submit, of course, so it can show up on my screen and I can share it with our guest. Or if you prefer to ask the question yourself, you may dial into our conference line, which is 323-476-3672. Again, 323-476-3672. The ID is 607393 pound. Again, 607393 pound. If you are listening to this as a replay, just know that you can still type in your question or your comment right there in the comment box, and we will have our guest reply to you as soon as we can. This is a very special day, because our guest today is an individual who has been a part of the yoga family since 2009. Initially through presenting an online workshop, and then moving on to co-producing with us the Virtual World Yoga and Meditation Conference in 2010. She is an amazing entrepreneur, yoga instructor, writer, consultant, and most of all, a very dear friend of ours. I'd like to welcome Megan McDonough to Trinity of Life. Hello, Megan.
Hello, my wonderful friend. That was a very gracious introduction. Thank you for that. It's really good to see you, to be back with the Yoga Hub family. And now we have video. This is a little bit of an upgrade since we last worked together.
Isn't it fun? Do you like being
There's
seen?
a lot more to think about, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I can't pace back and forth anymore, Christina.
Yes, and we can't be tapping on things.
And rolling over my ball and resting on the floor.
But I have to tell you, I still sit on my yoga ball. So I get to bounce up and down on it, even on camera.
And for those of you who are watching, don't get dizzy watching Christina bounce.
I know on Magical Medical Tour, Glenn always says to the guests, you know you've excited Christina when she starts bouncing.
Well, it's very good, my friend, to be back here. And it's good to sort of see, although I can't see your audience, I can picture them in my mind's eye. So it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, wonderful to have you with us. Megan, you know, a lot of the people who are watching our show may not know a thing about you. Can you share with us a little bit of your background?
Sure. So you gave some of the highlights. I'll tell you that for my professional career, I've always been interested in health and wellness. In fact, I started my professional career in what I would call traditional healthcare. I went to school for nuclear medicine and actually worked in diagnostic imaging for a number of years. I'm not going to say how many.
I knew there was more to the list that I gave out.
Yeah.
Nuclear medicine?
Nuclear medicine, diagnostic imaging. So I actually worked in the traditional healthcare area. In 2000, I left traditional healthcare and really switched and focused on training, coaching, consulting, teaching, yoga teaching. Rather than the traditional health and wellness, really focusing on the mind-body component, in particular, yoga. I mean, yoga for me, I've been practicing for 2 decades. It's my way of, it's my spiritual practice. It's also my way of staying sane. So I come to this experience and here with you today and your listeners and viewers with this idea of both traditional healthcare science background and a yoga teaching background and perspective that kind of pulls together some of the things I like to share with people in the hopes that we can all live a life that's more deliberate and more aware.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is going to be a question that's asked by a lot of people. I mean, you went from one world into many different worlds. Of course, in the world of
some people would still say that I'm way out there in some other world.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's just the next chapter. Come on.
There you go.
why did you move from the traditional medical world into this spiritual yoga world?
Yeah, it seems from the outside looking in that might be a weird or strange transition. For me, it was a natural one. Um, what I was doing in the traditional healthcare world just felt somewhat limiting to me, that I knew that there are other ways of being within myself that was more fulfilling for myself and allowed me to explore other avenues. So when I left, it was with this idea of an exploration more than an answer. I mean, the idea of living the questions for me is really important. So the questions that I was asking myself at the time, when I worked in traditional healthcare, it was in the corporate space. The questions I was asking myself were, how do I make the most of my life? How do I want to give back? What kind of legacy do I want to create? But most importantly, how do I create my own happiness? And for me at that time, working in a standard corporate world was not the answer. I knew for me. So I left that because I knew that there was more to explore.
Like tapping maple trees.
Like, yes, living on the farm, getting back to nature. Yeah, it's funny. I really, in some ways, hate that question when people say, well, tell me about yourself. Well, I'm a nuclear medicine technologist turned yoga teacher, living on a farm, starting new businesses. I don't encapsulate very easily into a sentence or two bio. I think what I have consistently brought, though, is this idea of living a deliberate life. Thoreau went to the woods to live deliberately. He retreated into this beautiful little Walden's Pond area, which is great for him. For me, my idea of living deliberately is to jump deeper into the world. He wrote, which is really something I leave on my refrigerator because it speaks very profoundly to my heart. This idea of, he wrote, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, to see if I could not learn what it had to teach and not, when I come to die, discover I had not lived. And whether it's me moving from the corporate world to yoga teaching or making maple syrup or starting a new business or doing education. The question is, how am I in my life living deliberately? And that translates to your viewers as well. And the question that I would ask them when someone asks, what do you do for a living? It's such a dry question because that's not really reaching to the heart of the matter, which is, how are you living your life deliberately, on purpose? That's what the world needs. The world doesn't need another cookie cutter approach to life. What the world is screaming for is you in your authentic, true way. This comes to mind if I could tell a quick story.
Oh, absolutely.
There's in the Greek mythology a story of the Procrustes. And he was kind of a mean god. When people were trying to pass by, he'd have a bed that he would make them lay in. And it was a trick question because a bed never quite fit. Here, lay down, take a rest. He would end up either cutting them off or stretching them to fit the bed. Only in the mythology did we have such a dark story. But so many times we try and live our lives from a place of trying to fit into the Procrustarian bed instead of in our own authentic life that's actually perfectly suited and perfectly fitted for us. Well, that was sort of a long answer to your question.
No, I what a fabulous answer, because just what we've said, that one piece, Megan, which was 5 minutes, okay, you have no doubt inspired hundreds of people to take the chance, to make the move, to make the shift, because looking at you, you've done so magnificently well, and just you've taken a dive into all these areas that where your heart has brought you to, and that's inspirational for the rest of the people who might be listening to this, who are very hesitant to make those moves, to take what they would call a chance.
Yeah, and I think the biggest chance we can take is the chance to trust life. And that doesn't necessarily mean I tend to take these big, wide jumps. I think the biggest jump you can take in terms of trusting life and yourself is to be able to be deliberate and pay attention to this moment right now. So we think it's this big global thing, like, okay, if I left this corporate job, then I would be able to express myself fully. Or if I only had a new husband, a new wife, if I was only 20 pounds lighter. And this future thinking, this way of looking like, if this happened, then I would be happy, is backwards. So the big leap, the chance that you really have to take is to move deeply within, to paying attention to yourself, to this experience, not in a narcissistic way, but in a way in which, I don't even know how to put this, a way in which you are very aware of what's happening with your emotions, with what's happening to your feelings, how that affects the relationships that you're in, how you're using your mind to be curious, to explore, to say, what if? To be connected to a deeper meaning and purpose in everyday life. Doesn't even mean that externally anything changes, but you're exploring these questions for yourself. That's the biggest chance that one can take, with the biggest payoff, I might add, as well.
Yes, I completely agree. Look where we're at now.
Who would have guessed it, right?
Yeah,
Really?
who would have guessed it? I mean, from just meeting to putting on your online workshop, all the way to co-producing with you, and now you're back as a guest here on our show, and next you'll have your own show. Yeah.
Well, here's the truth of it. You can lay out these beautiful plans, and it's really taking the steps towards the goals, because really when you come right down to it, does any goal or any destination ever look the way that you think it would look when you first started? It's never happened that way to me. It's that leap of faith that the net will appear, and it may look different than what you have imagined in your mind.
Yes, and that's the fun part. That's the adventure.
That is the fun part. That's the adventure. Yes, Yahoo.
So, Megan, now it's been a while since we've sort of connected and been in touch. Well, we're always in touch, but still, what have you been up to? You are always keeping busy and, really running right alongside, parallel with us in some way, shape, or form. What have you been up to?
Yes. So I've taken another leap, I guess you could say. That leap has taken me to learning a new language. And it's not French, it's not Spanish, it's not Italian. It is the language of positive psychology. That's what I spent the last year learning with Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar at Kripalu. And I'll tell you, quite frankly, that it was a language I was oblivious to 12 months ago. In fact, when Kripalu actually asked me to build out their online learning, and their certificate in positive psychology was that first program, I looked at the person who I was talking to. I said, what is this positive psychology stuff? Why are you bringing that lesson in first? And by the way, who is this Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar?
That's usually my thing. Who's that?
Who is
I thought you knew everybody in that world. Oh, good. I feel good now.
So apparently I am out of the loop on this one, Christina, because apparently both positive psychology and Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar are rather a big deal. And for me, they're very well known. For me, though, and maybe there are other listeners too who have never heard of positive psychology. For me, this past 12 months have been like, wow, I just never knew this existed. See, when we had talked last time, we talked about A Minute for Me, which is one of the programs I did for you, and using yoga to live with ease. Those programs really focused on those concepts of living deliberately. And I went at those concepts from the perspective of first being human, living this human experience as a mother, as a woman, as a business person, all of these components. So I talked a lot about, in the programs that we did before, my experience and how I use those stories of my life to gain more self-awareness. But I also came at it from yoga, because, like I said, that is really my main focus, is how one of the perspectives I use in viewing the world. But this positive psychology stuff, I'll tell you, this gave me a whole nother language. What positive psychology looks at is the science of happiness.
Mm.
So when we say the science of happiness, it's based on data, on research, on really rigorous research.
So science-based.
It's science-based, yes, which is really fascinating to me because the way that I've moved through the world, and I think actually a lot of yoga practitioners move through the world, is in a way that's highly kinesthetic, right? We feel our way through the world. Or as Leo Buscaglia said, braille your way into life. I love that image, that there's a tactile way in which we have a felt sense about which direction to head. But what the idea of positive psychology from a science perspective has given me is this ability to both leverage the kinesthetic way of life with this data. I love efficiency, so I can look at these studies in this field of positive psychology. I can say, the science is saying this is the most efficient way to do X, Y, Z, or to experience greater levels of happiness or flourishing or life satisfaction. And I could incorporate them in my felt sense way of being and bring both together. I could do it more efficiently and with more discrimination. Because, I mean, if you go into a self-help bookstore, I mean, you could just see rows and rows and rows of self-help book. Where do we go? Where do we get started? Looking at the science of positive psychology can give us really a very, very logical path by which to open the heart and feel more grounded in our life. So for me, that's what I've been up to. I've been both building with Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar and Kripalu the Certificate in Positive Psychology program, which is wonderful, and taking it for myself as a student. So I've been learning this new language since we last spoke.
This is amazing because really, if people who don't come from the background of the spirituality and they hear the yogis and people talk about following your heart and living life deliberately, they don't, it's hard. It's not easy for them to take in. It's like, oh, that's such a woo-woo world, you know? So now you're saying that this positive psychology is science-based. So it's for those who are more linear, just so to say, or have that way of thinking, it's easier for them to understand.
Yeah, there's multiple ways into this idea of happiness. It's not exclusive to those of us who are kinesthetic or body felt yogis. This path of happiness is open to all. And what I like to think about is, the Dalai Lama, who obviously into meditation, also looks at the neurobiology. It looks at the sciences. He tries to understand, how is my meditation practice, how can it be informed by the science? And the same is true of yoga, so that the more that we as yoga practitioners, if we are kinesthetically based and love this idea of using our body to feel through our life, that we can also bring in this data component, this research component that can inform us in a different way. Yeah. So it opens it up both for ourselves to learn more about our own experience through the data, and it opens up the doors wider for others who may not be, from a yoga perspective, wanting to enter into the doors of exploration through yoga. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Could you be more specific on how it does relate to yoga? So,
yes. Yeah. Let's talk about that. First of all, I want to relate a story about kind of the linkage in my mind between the emotional state and the physical. And I'll tell it by way of a story. I was working with a private yoga client, and we were doing, as we normally do, some movements, and we'd also talk about what the experience was. And when she came into the session, she described her work around this one particular problem as that she was cultivating patience, that she was working, her idea of what was happening was, it was difficult, but she was working with patience. As we worked through the yoga postures and took the body into different movements and cultivated awareness and had a dialogue about what was happening, she said, Megan, I think I was confusing patience with passivity. That's a really fine level of awareness between what's the difference between being patient, which has a felt sense of just a relaxed sense of things will work out, with passivity, meaning I don't really have much impact to change this, so I'm just going to be passive around it. Those are two very different emotions that could be easily confused. So in this yoga practice, we were able to more clearly discern, not we, she was more able to clearly discern what was the emotional set point. And I love that about yoga therapy in particular, because many times in yoga therapy, we talk about, align the shoulders this way, or lift up through the heart, or draw this hip back, or all these anatomical cues. There's also a very big emotional component, which is fascinating to me. So what I've been really studying with positive psychology is, along with the research, what in particular, how does that inform the yoga, the movement of our bodies? So I want to look at and show your audience a little bit about the research. What is the research about this idea of using our body postures as a way of developing positive emotional states? I think I have a slide for you too about this, but let me tell you first a couple of set the stage for what this study was. This one is fascinating. This was a study done by Dana Carney in Columbia, and actually Amy Cuddy at Harvard was involved in this study as well. And there's a great TED Talks video where Amy Cuddy in particular talks about this study. The research study went like this. There were two groups of people. One was asked to do what was called power posing, high power posing, and the other group was low power posing. So in the power posing in one, they would be instructed to take up a lot of space. So they would be instructed to put their hands behind their head and their feet up on their table, just like you would expect an executive maybe to do, the character of an executive at his desk. Or to stand up with their hands on the table. Those were power poses. Those were expansive, taking up space. It had a quality of openness. Versus the low power poses where people were hunched down. Maybe they crossed their arms or crossed their legs, or were closing in. So the slide, we can look at the slide, shows us those particular postures. One, the power posing, the elbows back, chest up, open. And the other group, the low power posing. What she did is when people came in to the research laboratory, she took saliva tests and she measured two hormones, testosterone and cortisol. So testosterone is typically the hormone associated with power, feeling of power, of strength, of confidence. And cortisol is usually that hormone associated with stress or anxiety. So they came in, she took baseline measurements of the testosterone and cortisol. Then she put people into the power pose for 1 minute. So they put their hand behind their head, put their feet up on the table for 1 minute. She'd take them out of that pose and put them into another power pose, with standing up with the hands on the table. That was one group. And then she would test again the testosterone and the cortisol. Second group came in, same thing, did a pre-test baseline of testosterone and cortisol. Put them into low power poses, which is the crunched up power poses where they were sitting and they maybe dropped their head or their arms and legs were crossed. Put them into one low power pose for 2 minutes, and again, the other for 1 minute, and then the other pose for another minute. So a total of 2 minutes. And then did that test again of the cortisol or testosterone. The results of these 2 minute poses are amazing to me. What it showed was, after 2 minutes of power posing, just putting this physical body in a particular setup, those people who are put into a power pose, a position of power, expansiveness, their testosterone level rose. I mean, it was measurable. You could see their testosterone levels rise. That's what the results were showing. So they felt more powerful. but they actually had the chemicals that determined the physiology changed. So it wasn't just like
Wow.
physically they changed, their physiology changed. So not only are they having more of the power hormone, testosterone, but their cortisol levels measurably went down. So just by putting the body, I mean, they're not asked to think anything differently. They're not asking to breathe anyways. They were just putting their body, their physical body in a different state. And I love this. I mean, isn't this amazing?
Wow.
I know their cortisol levels went down. Put them in a power pose, 2 minutes, testosterone rises, cortisol goes down. What happened with the other group, the low power posing? Well, their testosterone level actually went down.
Mm.
And their cortisol level, the stress hormone, went up. So this is amazing to me. I mean, I can't tell you, to me, this is sort of radical, the idea that in 2 minutes, the way in which we hold our body matters. It matters not only physically, but it matters physiologically.
Wow.
Right? Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. And now it explains why anytime I go into warrior pose, I suddenly feel this rush.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, we can say that, that's the relationship between things like of our emotional state and the physical postures. And that's not the only science. I mean, there's other science too that is compelling to me. An Aduchian smile, not just, so there's these smiles where you could do a nice smile. But then there's what's called an Aduchian smile, where you not just have this smile, but it goes bigger up into the crow's feet, So the regular smile just engages the zygomatic muscles, so it pulls up on the lips. But when you have an Aduchian smile, it also activates the orbiculus. Oh, I have to get into my science again. Orbicularis oculi. How's that? The orbicularis oculi muscle, which pulls up on the cheekbones and gives you those crow's feet. So, don't worry about the wrinkles. The truth is the Aduchian smile actually has been shown to raise those chemicals associated with positive emotions. So just the act of smiling is not just a physical thing. If we make it really heartfelt, it actually has a positive benefit. So keep smiling, Christina.
So keep those crow's feet. I always tell people my face is going to be a roadmap in a few years.
Yes, and you're a happy person, so good for you. Smile a lot, stand tall, and there's actually even more interesting science. John Cacioppo I think he's from Chicago, University of Chicago, did this really interesting study where he looked at the movement of arms. That he asked people to do one of two movements. Take your arms and pull in like this. So the arms are coming up and in, like come, right? We do that naturally. Or he asked them to push it down and out, like away. They were asked to look at some images, some characters. And those people who were doing this with their arm motions, in other words, come in, come closer, yes, I'm accepting, actually liked the characters better. They were judged as being more likable. Can you imagine that? Wow. So, this idea of how we move our hands, the gestures that we make, how we smile and use our face, how we stand and use our body. The relationship, from my perspective, is this relationship of how are we using this finely tuned instrument of this physical body to experience life.
The manifestation of what's inside shows on the outside.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And what about the reverse holding true, that what's on the outside can actually affect the inside?
Absolutely. And this is so funny you bring this up, Megan, because years ago when I was in an acting class, this instructor had a very specific style of teaching. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just reading and performing. He actually connected, the first 3 to 4 months was connecting the students to their body. And
Ah.
it was about, okay, it's so hard sometimes to come up with an emotion that you're trying to look for, especially when there's 100 people around you, there's lights, there's cameras, it's a little nerve-wracking. Now, how do you connect to the emotion? He had us work from the outside in to create the emotion.
So tell me more about that. That's fascinating. What did he have you do?
So something like, let's just say if it's something to do with a very sad situation, and the how that emotion would affect us. Well, for a lot of people, it's very hard to cry on cue. So what he would do is take us through breath work and create the breath as if though you were in a very sad situation. And it's amazing how when you begin that in your body, just through breath, which is so simple, it immediately kicks those different hormones and different pathways start to connect. And the next thing you know, you are set into that emotion. And that was on every level of emotion, from sadness, happiness, sexual experiences. Amazing what the body would end up following. So for people who didn't quite know or felt self-conscious, it was taken in through the breath and the body, and the emotion would connect. So it was, and where he learned it was through an indigenous tribe in South America. So, so it was it was a very fascinating technique. And so when you're speaking about this, about people, raising the arms or pushing away, it immediately sets off a certain feeling in the body. It's like, if you say, come, your arms are already open and you're going, come, right?
Right.
So there's a certain openness and happiness. You're pulling people in towards your heart. And then when you go like pushing away, it's like, go away. It's an immediate response, like, stay there, don't come close.
It's interesting that we tend to compartmentalize.
Yes.
What is an emotion? What is the intellectual concept of happiness or gratitude or appreciation? But there's a body realization of that emotion that it knows. I mean, this body knows that. And so the idea of putting ourselves into a position of happiness or in warrior position of strength, I think it's really powerful to think of the linkage between what we're learning in the Western science of positive psychology and how that particularly relates to the yoga postures that we do. Imagine the power of not just getting into the warrior pose, but getting into the warrior pose with the heartfelt idea of strength. And that really is what is intriguing me at this point, is that ability to link consciously what we're doing and moving and using the body as a way of consciously cultivating positive emotional states. Should we try it? I mean, it's not a big deal to do. So I would encourage.
Let's try it.
If you're up for it. Should you? Yes. Okay.
Oh, yes.
I have a slide just that says, remember a time when you felt powerful, strong, or confident. And if you can't pick a time of when you remember being powerful, strong, or confident, pick any time where it was a strong, positive emotional state. So maybe it was a time where you were laughing really hard with a friend, where you were holding your child, when you were running a marathon, when you were standing on top of a mountain. Maybe it was in your yoga practice. So we're just going to I'm actually going to time just a minute on my timer here. And what I want you to do is recreate that position. Now you can see me, but I can't see you. So feel free to stand up and strike a pose, as Madonna would say. Where were your hands in space when you felt this powerful emotion? What was your face doing, particularly your mouth? How did your feet feel? How were you breathing? And recreate that in this moment. recreating the physical posture of the legs, hips, the belly, the chest, the arms, the breath, the face. Think of that felt sense. That was a minute. So, Christina, what did you notice?
Oh, I noticed my, it's amazing. I love this. My energy from my chest started to explode outward because my shoulders were rolled back, my hands were by their side, but I could feel this incredible energy just explode forward, and a sense of calmness. My face was relaxed, and like a soft smile, but very, almost like very grounded, really deep in. That's nice.
That's nice.
Let's do that again. No.
So I would encourage, if anybody's wants to do so when you're watching live, or even if you record it, after you do that 60-second practice of putting the physical body in a particular posture and linking that with your emotional well-being, type in or write in what your experience was. I would be very interested in hearing from you. So please do that. Let me know what your experience was. Because what we're building out, Christina, you had asked, this kind of circles full circle back to your first question of what's next. Actually, Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar and I are building a program called Yoga Spire. And we have actually a little slide up on that, which talks about the actual yoga practice by which we consciously and deliberately link positive emotional states to physical postures, yoga postures. So it's a linkage of positive psychology and yoga. So we're calling it Yoga Spire. And again, it links the positive and the emotional. So those two things are what's next. And I'm actually very excited about this, not only from a perspective of building this out, but also in terms of doing some research on that. Have always looked at my yoga practice as my cultivating physical well-being, but also the emotional well-being too. I know I feel different after doing yoga than before. So we're going to be doing some research on this. We're actually building out some research protocols by how do we measure this? How do we look at this? How do I get the data behind it? So I've kind of come full circle myself and looking at the yoga practice in one way, and now trying to integrate the data and the statistics and the information from positive psychology into this practice.
Ooh, that's a nice little journey that you're taking right now, Megan.
Yes, it's an exciting one. I like this.
It is. And again, it's back to the combination of the science and your woo-woo.
The science and your woo-woo. Yes, that's a very professional way of saying it. The science and the woo-woo. Yes. My husband likes to tell me I'm a little woo-woo at times, so there you go. Yeah.
Well, that's magnificent. And through Yoga Spire, is that a course that you are creating?
Yes, we're building out the actual practice now. What does it look like to go take a Yoga Spire class, for example? A lot of it will look very similar to a yoga class, right? I mean, because we know that these postures do cultivate positive emotional states, but there'll also be this emotional component, this really specific way of looking at emotional states and cultivating it. So we're actually developing it now. It will be hopefully unfolded at the upcoming International Association of Yoga Therapy, the conference in Boston. Oh, I hope I see you there, Christina. I don't know if you're going to that one. Actually, that was one of the first times we met a very long time ago. The very first IAYT conference in California. It was the first time that we had our paths had crossed, I think, a long time ago.
Or we were there at the same time, and we literally crossed.
Our paths crossed. I don't know how we missed each other there, but we did. So hopefully we'll be unfolding kind of the basic premise of what it is that we're doing. Our idea is later this year we'll have an online course about Yoga Spire. And then next year our plan is to actually have a Yoga Spire blended learning course at Kripalu. So we'll actually go on site to Kripalu, have a 5-day immersion, have 3 months of at-home practice, followed by another 5 days at Kripalu. So a blended learning program where people get the best of the on-site work and the online work, so you can continue your practice.
So this would be become a certified course.
Yeah, we actually will not be a 200 or 500 hour course. This will be what I would call a specialty school where you could take training particular around it. So you could be already a yoga teacher and want to focus on this particular part of the yoga practice. Or you can be an everyday person, a non-yoga practitioner, and still want to be able to use the physical body to develop emotional well-being. So it'll actually be open to all. It won't be a 200 or 500 hour training. You can use it for continuing education credits, but it's not going to be a 200 or 500 hour training.
Oh, that's very exciting. A new addition to the yoga therapy world.
Yes, yes, it is. I'm very excited about that. Yes.
And this is all done through Kripalu or Wholebeing Institute?
Wholebeing Institute. Wholebeing Institute is the educational institution that Tal and I founded because we're both committed to this idea of whole person well-being. That the person can't be segmented into, okay, this is learning for the mind or this is learning for the body, that instead the curriculum really needs to be integrated and honor the whole person to really make the most magnificent change. So we actually, within Wholebeing Institute, have a 5-point methodology. And it's based on the methodology we're calling Spire. To have the most comprehensive well-being, these 5 things are spiritual well-being, which is that well-being of meaning and purpose in your life. Physical well-being, taking care of this wonderful body that you inhabit. Intellectual well-being, that idea of using the mind to further your intellectual knowledge. Relational well-being, how we work in our community with our family, our friends, the relationship between self and others, and then the emotional well-being, which is really the positive psychology part. So this idea of the Spire methodology within Wholebeing Institute is a way of looking at human flourishing, and then eventually being the change that you want to see in the world, that it's not just learning because it's good to collect knowledge. It's learning so that when you go out into the world, you can pay it back. You're firmly rooted in yourself and reaching outward. And that's what I love so much about that word spire. Spire means the highest point, but it also is the root word to breathe, to inspire, to respire. So that in order to make the biggest impact, we must both be rooted deeply in our own truth and authenticity and reach out to the highest point. That's what fascinates, and that's what Tal and I are building. So the Yoga Spire course will be one course within the Wholebeing Institute. The other ones are like the Certificate in Positive Psychology, which is the one that is being housed at Kripalu. That's an 11-month-long program. And actually, our next course is starting in April. I would strongly encourage yoga teachers or yoga professionals, or in fact, anybody that's watching, if this material calls to you, to check that out, because it's really a powerful program. It's changed what I'm doing.
It's changed so much that you have created with Tal, whom you didn't know anything of a year ago, into collaborating with him and opening this new institute together. How wonderful!
Yeah, I do call him now my teacher. Tal is he's quite a guy. So I'm very blessed and fortunate to work with him and to build this out. And he's a good guy to study with.
Mm-hmm. Megan, can you give us a little more of the vision of the Wholebeing Institute? I know you gave us a portion in the Yoga Spire. Is that the first stages of development that you're going through?
Yes. So we're going to have a whole bunch of online courses around positive psychology. Those are being built out now, and actually will be opening up this summer, which will be modules which are about 5 weeks in length that dovetail anywhere from a relationship module about how to really cultivate strong relationships to coaching modules, how can you use positive psychology in coaching, to introduction to positive psychology. So for those of you who are unable to commit to an 11-month intensive program with a certificate course, maybe you're interested in taking a shorter course, those will be available through Wholebeing Institute very shortly. And the Yoga Spire curriculum by itself will be available in a blended learning program through Kapalo in 2014. The online version will be available also later this year.
Oh, that's...
You would ask, did I answer your question or did I diverge? You would ask me the bigger vision of
Yes.
Wholebeing Institute?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the vision is very simple, to help people be the change they want to see in the world. It's interesting that we think the change happens out there. It's something we do if we had the the right organizational structure or the right material, we could implement the change. But really, change happens first internally, and then we move out into the world. So, very, very simplistically, Wholebeing Institute helps people be the change they want to see in the world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, it's you hit on something that keeps coming up a lot when we're in conversations with people, and they say to us, "Oh, well, yes, we hope that will begin to happen." We constantly hear that. "Oh, well, maybe one day." Whereas what I'm hearing from you is to actually create that awareness in individuals to begin to cultivate it within themselves first.
Yeah, and I'll give you a perfect example. I mean, this came up when we were developing the Yoga Spire curriculum. Tal and I had this back and forth dialogue about affirmations, for example. So if we wanted to create more joy and happiness and peace and patience in the world, but we're feeling really impatient, angry, and mad, how do we reconcile that? And so there's a lot of the self-help will tell us, well, just use an affirmation, everything will be okay, or I am peaceful, or I am happy. In fact, some of the science shows if you have low self-esteem and you try and put on or use those affirmations, they don't work. And why is that? One of the things is that when we try and affirm something that's so outside of our ability to hold it, in other words, when I think the affirmation of I'm beautiful and great, and I'm feeling really low and miserable, that there's such a difference between that, that the body will and the mind will take, will not live with that dichotomy. They'll go with the reality. So instead of affirmations, it's really focusing on using the body in a way that feels consistent and in alignment with that. So it's not a fake affirmation. It's maybe 1 degree in the right direction towards patience. So for example, let's take a real life example. I don't want to get too philosophical. I want to keep it grounded within the body. So if we're at a grocery store and we're tapping our foot and we're feeling really impatient with this person in front of us because they're having a conversation with the teller. And, we're tapping away and we're getting angry and we feel angry inside. And we use the affirmation, I'm peaceful, I'm loving. And we
meanwhile, our foot's tapping.
Yeah, right. I got to tell you an aside of this, Christina. A friend of mine gave me little Post-it notes one Christmas that said, I do yoga, I drink green tea, and still I want to smack someone.
I'm human. No.
That's right. And so, it doesn't help when we try and put on these affirmations that are just so against what our experiences in our body. But what if instead of that, of trying to force an affirmation that is so far from our reality that it's just discounted by the mind body, what if we were to stop tapping our foot, breathe deeply into the belly, inhale into the chest, and remember a time when we were patient, and let that emotion of patience be expressed through the physical body.
Mm.
That's probably a little more realistic than trying to put on a emotional state that is so far from the truth it doesn't jive with your experience.
And it makes total sense. That completely makes. I mean, thank you for that, Megan.
What brought to mind too is this Mary Oliver, who I love as a poet. Her Wild Geese. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that poem. It's a beautiful poem, and in it she writes, "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting." I think that's just a beautiful way of saying, well, she actually finishes that line by saying, you only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. And that, to me, is sort of the essence of Yoga Spire, is that when you settle down into your body and you begin to really consciously cultivate the body as a fine instrument, to be aware of what does it love? What does this body, love in this moment? So we don't have to work really hard at it. We don't have to walk through the desert for 100 miles on our knees. It can be a lot more fun. It can be a lot more simple. And more natural and organic.
That's so interesting that you say that, because you know how we go through life when we go, oh, I would really like to be able to do that, and I'm going to start doing that. We get fully focused and delve into something, and it's for a moment, and we kind of back off. It's almost like a diet. We go full force into it, and okay, I'm going to do this with my diet, and this is how I'm going to make the change, and then as time goes on, it kind of drifts away. And I was just saying that this weekend. We were at the Natural Products Expo West and seeing all these incredible new products, etc., that was coming out. And, I come from a background and a lineage of a lot of food, a lot of different types of food, not always good for you. Mm-hmm. Hence why the family has a history of cholesterol, high blood pressure, things like that. And it's like, okay, well, I don't have all that. Blessed be that I made the change early. But and I never could quite understand the foods that we eat. And the means of, yes, I feel better if I eat a salad and I feel better here and there, but the body is kind of getting used to it. And through these years, I mean, this time I walk through, and just the energy from the raw foods and the new grains and everything that was around us, I said, wow, I can really get into this right now. It wasn't forced. It was almost like a morphing in time,
Yes.
And it was so true to the body. I mean, literally, I can hear those close to me going,
I want a carrot. I want a carrot now.
I want a carrot. Can I just have a handful of that raw cereal?
Yeah.
And that, just give me a shot instead of tequila. Give me a shot of that wheatgrass.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. So this idea of which you've been living is what we do again and again becomes a ritual and a habit. And the idea of just saying, being rooted in the body also becomes a ritual or a habit. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. So wherever you are, it's a great place to be. It's a great place to start. You don't have to go anywhere or do anything other than turn your attention to your own experience.
That's beautiful. Really beautiful. Megan, we had a couple of comments come in here. One was, wow, thank you, Megan. It felt great to relive the powerful feeling of true well-being through that exercise.
You're welcome.
And the next was, I hope I heard this question right. Do you have to be a professional in psychology or yoga to sign up for this class?
Oh, that's a great question. It's one I get a lot because there's a mistaken impression that we need to be in a certain degree or hold a certain credential to be able to learn positive psychology. That's not the case. And you'd be very welcome at the certificate in positive psychology. We have people in that class now, all spectrums. We do have professional psychologists, therapists. We have professional yoga teachers or trained yoga teachers, but we also have a wide variety of people that are taking this for personal development. We have retired people. I think our youngest is in her 20s. She's actually taking it for college credits. And on the older side, we have people who are in their 70s. So we have a whole spectrum of people within the course. All ages, demographics, occupations that are learning about positive psychology, and most importantly, how to apply those concepts to build a happier life for themselves. We have people who are taking it, like I said, into their work, either coaches or therapists or yoga teachers, or for themselves. And by the way, when you do things for yourself, obviously it impacts those relationships around you. So with family and friends and your community, even if you're doing it for your personal development, there's a natural evolution of that having an impact in waves of your community around you.
Beautiful. Megan, we're coming to the top of our hour here. How can people find out more about this?
So Wholebeing Institute.com is the website. So Wholebeing, one word, wholebeinginstitute.com. There you'll find a listing of basically the courses that I just discussed in this past hour. And also there'll be a link directly to Kripalu, which we are housing quite a number of our programs. So, for example, the certificate in positive psychology at Kripalu, for those of you who would like to find out more about that, that's kripalu.org/positive. And you can find out about the courses that are being held at Kripalu. Does that cover it, Christina?
That does, Megan. Is there anything else that you would like to share that we might not have touched upon?
Yes, I would simply like to share that I want to thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure reconnecting with you. And I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you. It's been a pleasure being with you again in this way.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you, Megan. I mean, every time we get together, we have good fun, and you always bring such wonderful awarenesses to us. And I love the sharing of your stories. I miss that.
Why did you miss it? I'm right here with you.
I know.
And an hour goes in a blink of an eye. That hour went really quickly for me.
It did. It did for all of us. For all of us. Thank you so much. And hopefully we will get you back on the show again as this continues to move forward, this wonderful new venture that you have. And we get to play more in the sandbox together.
Yahoo! I'm all for that. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Megan McDonough. I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us in this new platform of education and information. We're grateful for your continuous support and look forward to hearing your feedback on how we can serve you better. We invite you to join us live every Tuesday for Magical Medical Tour at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time, 1:30 Eastern Time. Wednesday for Trinity of Life at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, followed every other week with Flowing into Awareness with Anatara. Again, if you would like to learn more about the upcoming programs and courses for a course in positive psychology, it is offered at Kripalu. Please visit kripalu.org/positive. And if you would like to be in touch or continually informed about what Wholebeinginstitute.com is offering, please go to Wholebeinginstitute.com. Thank you very much for joining us today. And until next time, namaste.